If you were standing in the deserts of Arabia back in late antiquity, you never would have guessed that one of the world's greatest, most influential civilizations was about to be born right there. But for the next 1,000 years, that's exactly what happened. We're talking about massive empires ruled by caliphs and sultans through these incredible golden ages and, yeah, some absolutely devastating catastrophes. So let's get into it. This is an epic story.
And we have to start with a question that honestly sounds kind of crazy. How on earth did an empire whose first four leaders, three of them were assassinated, how did that empire even survive its own birth? It seems impossible, right? But understanding this paradox is the key to understanding, well, everything that comes next. Okay, so let's rewind the clock. Our story kicks off in the 6th century on the Arabian Peninsula. Now, at the time, this place was basically seen as the backyard of two global superpowers, the Christian Byzantine Empire to the west and the Persian Sasanian Empire over in the east. It was a land of nomads and tribes, but believe me, all of that was about to change in a huge way. So, around the year 570, a man named Muhammad was born in the city of Mecca. Now, in the Islamic tradition, he's believed to be God's final prophet who was sent to spread a message of pure monotheism. His journey from Mecca to Medina was so important that it actually marks the start of the Islamic calendar. And in a really short time, he managed to do something nobody thought possible. He united all these warring Arab tribes into a single Muslim nation. But then, in 632, he died. And suddenly, there's this massive power vacuum. Who's going to lead now? That single question, it would echo for centuries.
What happens next is it's an era of these mind-blowing contradictions. On one hand, you've got these incredible military conquests that are literally redrawing the map of the world. And on the other hand, you've got these deep, painful internal divisions that are threatening to tear this new community apart from the inside. So the first four successors, or caliphs, are known as the Rashidun, which means the rightly guided. And in just 30 years, they did the impossible. They built a state, set up a bureaucracy, and launched these military campaigns that were so ridiculously successful, they completely swallowed the entire Persian Empire and took huge chunks of territory from the Byzantines. But here's the paradox again. While Muslim tradition looks back on this as the glory days, the reality was that this incredible success was happening at the exact same time as civil wars and assassinations. And all of that tension, it finally boiled over and created the biggest split in Islam, one that still exists today. And it all started as a political argument. One group, who we now call the Shias, believed that the Prophet had specifically chosen his cousin and son-in-law Ali to be the next leader. But the other group, who became the Sunnis, they just didn't see it that way. And over time, what started as a political disagreement became a deep, deep religious divide. After the Rashidun period, a family called the Umayyads seized power in 661. And this is where things really changed. The old system of choosing a leader based on their merit and closeness to the prophet, gone. In its place, you get a dynasty, a monarchy, where power is just passed down from father to son. They even moved the capital out of Arabia all the way to Damascus in Syria, creating a new, more centralized, Arab-focused empire. The Umayyads really locked down their power by defeating and killing Ali's son at the Battle of Karbala. It was a completely devastating event, and it's absolutely central to Shia identity even today. But, and you can probably see the pattern here, even with all that power, the same old problems, rebellions, civil wars, internal divisions, they all came back. And eventually, the Umayyad dynasty came crashing down. But out of all that chaos, a new dynasty rose up in 750. The Abbasids, and with them, something really interesting happens. The focus of the Islamic world starts to shift away from just pure conquest and more towards culture, science, and learning. This is the start of the legendary Islamic Golden Age. The Abbasids moved the capital again, but this time they built a brand new city completely from scratch. They called it Baghdad, and it didn't take long for it to become the absolute center of the known world. It was a global hub for trade, knowledge, power, you name it. By all accounts, it was the biggest and wealthiest city on the entire planet. And what was happening in Baghdad was just extraordinary. The caliphs sponsored this huge translation movement, taking all the old scientific and philosophical works from the Greeks and translating them into Arabic, preserving them, and then building on them. They set up the famous House of Wisdom, which was this massive library and academy that drew in the smartest people from all over the world. They even had diplomatic ties with Charlemagne way over in Europe. They famously sent him an elephant as a gift. But, no golden age lasts forever. Starting in the mid-9th century, the empire slowly started to break apart. The caliph in Baghdad began to lose his real political and military power. He became more of a religious figurehead, kind of like the Queen of England today. The real power on the ground shifted to local Persian and Turkic warlords who started carving out their own little kingdoms. So here's the crucial setup for what comes next. The Islamic world was already broken, politically divided, and as it was fracturing from the inside, two massive, terrifying storms were gathering on the horizon. One was brewing in the west, but the other one, coming from the east, that one was an unstoppable force that was going to burn the world's greatest city to the ground. So yeah, this next chapter in the story is all about invasion. The heartlands of the Islamic world are about to get hit from two directions at once by two totally different kinds of enemies. This timeline just shows you how broken things had become. By the 10th century, you have a rival Shia caliphate in Cairo. Then a new power, the Seljuk Turks, they come in and take actual control of Baghdad itself, even though they kept the caliph around as a symbol. It was this total division that created a massive opportunity. So in 1095, when armies from Europe launched the First Crusade to go and capture Jerusalem, the timing for them couldn't have been better. Eventually, a response to the Crusaders came from one of the most famous figures in history, the Kurdish general Saladin. He was brilliant. He managed to unite Egypt and Syria under his rule, and in 1187, he absolutely crushed the main Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin and took back Jerusalem. It was a huge blow to the Crusaders, for sure, but it wasn't the end of their story in the region. Because the bigger threat, the storm from the east, was still coming, and it would arrive in this year, 1258, a year that marks one of the most catastrophic turning points in the history of the world. In 1258, the Mongol armies, led by Hulagu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, showed up at the walls of Baghdad. The siege was short. They poured into the city, massacred the people, and destroyed the House of Wisdom, literally throwing so many priceless books into the Tigris River that it was said to run black with ink. They killed the last Abbasid caliph by rolling him up in a carpet and having horses trample him to death. And just like that, 500 years of Abbasid rule and the Islamic Golden Age were gone. I mean, it is really hard to overstate the trauma of the Mongol invasions. But out of the ashes of Baghdad's destruction, new powers were about to rise up, to defend what was left and to build a completely new order. After wrecking Baghdad, the Mongols set their sights on Egypt. And that's where the unstoppable force finally met an immovable object. See, Egypt was ruled by the Mamluks, a really unique warrior class of former slave soldiers who had risen up to become the masters. And in 1260, at a battle called Ain Jalut, the Mongols did what nobody in the world thought was possible. They beat the Mongols. They stopped their westward advance cold for the first time in history and earned themselves the title Defenders of Islam. So while the Mamluks were holding down the south, a new power was slowly but surely growing up in the north. Around the year 1300, a Turkic chief named Osman founded a tiny state. Over the next couple of centuries, his descendants, the Ottomans, just kept expanding. Then came 1453, when they conquered the mighty city of Constantinople, ending the 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire. And by 1517, they even defeated the Mamluks, which made the Ottoman Sultan the new caliph and the undisputed leader of the Sunni Muslim world. And the Ottomans weren't the only ones. This whole era saw the rise of three huge, stable Islamic states that historians call the Gunpowder Empires. So you had the Sunni Ottomans in the west, the Shia Safavid Empire in Persia, modern-day Iran, and the mighty Mughal Empire down in India. Together, they brought in a whole new age of Islamic power and stability. And of all of them, the Ottoman Empire would be the one that lasted the longest. It became the last caliphate in Islamic history, and it survived for an incredible 600 years. It was this huge multinational empire that only finally came to an end in the 20th century, after it was defeated in World War I. So, there you have it. From a handful of desert tribes to a series of world-spanning empires, this 1,000-year story of conquest, brilliant culture, devastating fractures, and amazing renewal, it truly, fundamentally shaped the world that we all live in today. And that leaves us with one last big question. What lessons can we take from this incredible history for our own future?